There's a lot on the line for a lot of players during training camp this summer for the Philadelphia Eagles, but who has the most to lose? We'll get into that and more coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to this Friday edition of the show. I'm your host, as always, Louis DiBiase. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL in all capital letters. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Hopefully that's for Philadelphia Eagles tickets. I got mine through Gametime. Coming up this year, Eagles, Bears, Black Friday, Eagles, Bills, and Buffalo. Can't wait for the 2025 season to get rolling, but we still have all of training camp to go and 2 weeks of the preseason before the Eagles take on the Cowboys in the Thursday night NFL season opener as they try to defend, even though they say they're not defending the Super Bowl championship of 2024, they are defending Super Bowl champions going for a repeat. But again, training camp is right now what they're focused on. I truly do believe that this team takes what Nick Sirianni says to heart when he says that they have to climb the mountain again. They have to be obsessed with the process day by day. Like, they have to have that kind of mentality, and I think they have that at training camp. It's why they're saying things like they're not defending champions. The 2024 Eagles are gone. They don't exist anymore. It's a new year. It's a new team, and it starts right now in camp to build this thing up back into the kind of team that they were last year. There's a lot on the line for a lot of players in the starting lineup, role players, backups. Today I want to do some training camp superlatives, and the first one that I want to do is who has the most to lose during 2025 Philadelphia Eagles training camp. And for me, it's right guard Tyler Steen. Now, a lot of these guys on the 53-man roster, on the 90, the bubble, they're fighting for their NFL lives. So it's hard to say that a guy like Tyler Steen, who's a roster lock, is a favorite to start at right guard for the majority of this season, if not the entire season. I guess some people would say it's hard to say that he is the player that has the most to lose. But for me, I think he is the guy that has the most to lose when we're talking about potential starters, right? Because the Eagles, I think, over the last couple of years have shown, although he was the first pick in the third round of 2023 out of the University of Alabama, Jeff Stoutland handpicked this guy, clearly liked him coming out of college. He was the highest tackle pick the Eagles made at the time because he's a guard, but they picked him as a tackle since they selected Andre Dillard in the first round 4 years before that in 2019. But ever since then, all they've told us by their actions and even their limited words about Tyler Steen is that they see him as a backup or a maybe average, good, but not great starter. Like, that's what their actions and their words have said. They have not been very praiseworthy of Tyler Steen during press conferences. They've given Mekhi Becton and Cam Jurgens the starting right guard job over him 2 years in a row. And why it's such a big-time offseason, a big-time training camp for Tyler Steen this year is because he does finally have that legit chance where there is no Cam Jurgens competing with him at right guard. There is no Mekhi Becton that the Eagles, it felt like 2 years in a row, the Eagles wanted the other guy in the competition to win the job. They wanted Cam Jurgens in 2023. They wanted Mekhi Becton last year. This season, they didn't bring in that kind of competition. Like, sure, they traded for Kenyan Green, a former top 15 pick, but he's nowhere near the caliber of player of Cam Jurgens or Mekhi Becton. They drafted 3 offensive linemen on day 3. They have veterans like, Matt Pryor and Trevor Keegan, in the building, but they didn't really add any obvious competition, even somebody that would be favored to win the job over Steen. Steen is the clear and obvious favorite to start at right guard. Like, there is no Mekhi Becton competing with him. But I will say why this is such a do-or-die training camp for Steen is, like, this is his last chance, at least in Philadelphia, to prove that he can be a starter. He can be a long-term piece of the puzzle on the offensive line. Because if not, if he doesn't even go out there and take the bull by the reins, right? And he earns this job. Although there is no Becton or Jurgens competing for right guard, Kenyan Green is a player they're intrigued by. They do have 3 different rookies on day 3 that they drafted that they like their tackle guard versatility, or even you could talk about Drew Kendall as well in that equation, a center guard tweener. They brought in somebody like Holland Pierce a UDFA out of Rutgers. It's a mammoth of a human being that I think Jeff Stoutland is really enamored by his ability to be this year's giant right guard to replace Mekhi Becton last year. So although there's not the obvious favored competition of a Cam Jurgens or a Mekhi Becton, there's a lot of different players now in this competition. Like it's a deeper competition because you could argue there's like 4 or 5 other players that could win this job. And again, Tyler Steen is the clear and obvious betting favorite, but there's some other intriguing options, and a lot of them are young players that the Eagles really like. And if Steen, again, is just like, he's okay, like he didn't do anything to lose the job this summer, but he didn't do anything to win it either, that opens the opportunity. That opens the door for one of these rookies, or, you know, even a Keegan from Michigan last year, their 5th-round pick in 2024, coming into year 2. Like, it gives one of those guys an opportunity, or Kenyan Green, to live up to that top 15 potential that the Texans saw in him in 2022. It gives them a window that the Eagles are kind of always looking for. They don't want the floor for starting offensive linemen. They want the ceiling. So Tyler Steen is the favorite, but he needs to go out there and still, like, prove to them he is obviously the guy. Because if it's close, Steen will probably win the job still, but they're going to be like, could we do better? And that's what I feel like they've always asked about Tyler Steen. So I think he has the most to lose of any player, especially in the starting lineup during this year's training camp. Another training camp superlative for me on defense, who's the biggest unknown of this summer? For me, it's Jordan Davis. And we do know exactly who he's been. We do know to a degree what we're getting in Jordan Davis. You're going to get a really, really good 2-down run stopper. But the unknown with Jordan Davis has to do with if he's going to be more. And he sounds and he looks great. He says he's down 26 pounds. It looks like he's in shape, really committed to playing more this year. You know, being in shape in November, December, being in shape for the playoff run, being somebody they can rely on in every situation, passing, running. He can play entire drives without going to the bench. Like, Jordan Davis sounds like he's really committed to that because over the years, he's not been that player for the Eagles. Like, yeah, you know what you're getting in him. He's a really good 2-down run stopper, but the unknown is if he's ever going to live up to the potential they saw in him in 2022 when they traded up inside the top 20 to go and get this guy. And when they did that, they didn't do that with the idea that he was only going to be a 2-down run-stopping nose tackle. Like, they expected him to be a whole lot more. And this year is kind of the make-or-break season. They picked up his 5th-year option, and I think they are very comfortable with him in the role he's had the last couple of years, and I think that would even warrant them giving him a, you know, certain kind of contract extension, a Reed Blankenship type of deal that's not, you know, market breaking at his position. But I think the Eagles do even value Davis's role that he has right now. But if he wants to really cash in, if he wants to truly cash in on the potential they saw in him, if he wants to cash in on a big money contract extension that a lot of these defensive tackles are getting and are going to get, his teammate Jalen Carter is going to get, if he wants to beat out Moro Ojoma as an every down player, the second guy leading the Eagles in snaps at defensive tackle, then he needs to be more than what he's been. And that's the interesting part about all of this, is that the Eagles have some options next to him. Moro Ojoma, rookie Ty Robinson, Thomas Booker coming back in year 2 in this system with Vic Fangio. But kind of like Tyler Steen, there is no Milton Williams next to him. Like, there's no Mekhi Becton competing with Tyler Steen. Like, yeah, Moro Ojoma I expect big things from this year, but you would hope that Jordan Davis, if he takes the step, should be able to beat out Ojoma as that guy that is second in snaps. Because last year he was 4th. Not only was he behind Jalen Carter, he was behind Milton Williams, he was also behind Moro Ojoma. Jordan Davis didn't even play 35% of the snaps last year. So there's a lot of unknowns in a lot of these camp battles with a lot of these rookies. But when it comes again to the top of the roster, who's the biggest unknown? It is Jordan Davis, because we know what kind of floor he has, but what's unknown is the ceiling. Because he does look really good, and he's saying all the right things, and he had a sack in the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. So we're holding out for more, but we got to see it on the football field, and not just in August, September, October. But like I said on the show yesterday, we need to see it in November, December, and January. I'll give him credit though; he did in the playoffs last year. We got to see him do it for the majority of this season as well, if he wants to truly cash in next year. And then another superlative before we take a break for 2025 training camp. Who's the training camp darling of this year's roster? The Paul Turner, if you will, the Ifeanyi Momo, a guy that fans are enamored with, that's going to ball out in the summer, in training camp, in the preseason. You're going to hear about him a lot. but maybe he doesn't make the 53-man roster anyway. I think wide receiver, it feels like it's always receiver or running back. It's Terrace Marshall Jr. I think Terrace Marshall has already been one of the Eagles' best receivers throughout the spring, in OTAs, in training camp. Jalen Hurts mentioned him by name, but I will say he could be a player that has a great summer that still doesn't make the 53 because Avery Williams has running back receiver versatility. He's a kick and punt returner. That could keep him on the roster over Terrace Marshall. Special teams is something you can't forget about. Johnny Wilson and Nia Smith were draft picks of Howie Roseman last year that he kept on the 53-man roster. The tiebreaker might go to the draft pick. So all of those guys could make the team still over Terrace Marshall Jr., even if he has a good summer. Even a Danny Gray could make it over him because he has that niche role of elite downfield speed. So I think Terrace Marshall's my pick this year for the guy that everybody's enamored with in camp. The Rashid Bailey, the Paul Turner, the Raheem Mostert, right? A lot of these Eagles standouts in the preseason that just never made the roster despite the result of what they did in training camp in the preseason. I think Terrace Marshall Jr. could be that guy, but I do predict as of right now, he does make the 53-man roster. All right, we'll continue some training camp superlatives coming up next right here on this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles. Who's a surprise cut that we might not see coming on this team? We'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Have you decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. I know I've been there. That was me in 2022 going to Eagles 49ers in the NFC Championship. I didn't buy those tickets till the day before. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all the stress. With the money you can save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, and we know how expensive that is in NFL stadiums. Or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it all possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app, they actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL in all capital letters for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We are doing some training camp superlatives today on the Locked On Eagles podcast as training camp kicked off officially this week. The Eagles have had a couple days of practice. We've had some standouts. We've had some really interesting press conferences and, kind of revelations on injury updates and the starting lineup on both sides of the ball. It's been a good first week of camp for sure. And I'm very encouraged by what I've seen with the depth chart, with a lot of the young players fighting for jobs, how the backups look. I think this roster, again, it's very young, especially on defense. A lot of it's projection-based. We'll see what happens in camp moving forward in the preseason. But I think so far, so good. One player that I'm very intrigued by, and I want to talk about this guy coming up right here as we continue our superlatives. That's young, heading into year two, a player I'm very intrigued to see what he does in camp and the preseason because he showed some things last year. He was a my guy coming out of the draft, but he does have some issues from last year he showed that he has to fix. It's Johnny Wilson, and this training camp superlative is positional change watch. Position change watch. Johnny Wilson is somebody that I think you should watch that could potentially go from his natural position of wide receiver to maybe being moved at tight end. And I've floated this idea on the podcast probably a couple times, but I really think the Eagles should consider this because although Johnny Wilson is pretty explosive for a 6'7" receiver, and I agree with what Howie Roseman said about him last year after the draft that, he does separate better than guys his size. I do think his lower body, his lateral mobility is, he's not a stiff wide receiver for his size, but that's compared to other players at his size and stature. For me, Johnny Wilson's ever going to be one of the best route runners in football. And the problem last year was, too, he's not a sure-handed guy either that you can trust in contested catch situations. He had drop problems. And when you're 6'7", and you can't really create separation all that well from corners, you got to at least be able to catch the football because odds are a corner's going to be, or a safety's going to be draped all over you when you get targeted. So he's got to hit the jugs machine for sure. I do still think that the Eagles will likely use him at receiver, but I would suggest trying him out at least at tight end or more of an inline receiver. when you use 12 personnel, maybe he's out there instead of a Grant Calcaterra as a tight end next to Dallas Goedert, like in power packages, especially in the red zone. It's something I would like to see. Pro Football Focus actually last year ranked him as the highest graded pass blocking receiver in the entire NFL. He was the second highest graded run blocking receiver among all Eagles receivers, only behind A.J. Brown. So Johnny Wilson, he can block. We know size is not an issue at tight end. Like, he's not a Jordan Matthews. He's 6'7". And if you put on some weight, put on some size, some muscle, some power, I don't know. I think Johnny Wilson could be the answer to your tight end 2 issues. Like, I think he could be somebody that competes with Grant Calcaterra for playing time. I think they should consider it. If they're going to keep him on this roster and he doesn't play special teams, and we'll see what kind of steps he takes at wide receiver. He had a good training camp last year. It's why he made the 53. But I just think he might be a better tight end. And if, I'm not saying even he's going to be a hand in the dirt lining up next to Lane Johnson kind of classic tight end, but someone that plays that big Zach Ertz kind of role, like when it comes to what routes you're running, what you're doing over the middle of the field. I think they should use Johnny Wilson in that way more this year. I think they should use him in the red zone more. Positional watch for the Philadelphia Eagles in training camp. I think it's second-year receiver Johnny Wilson. All right, I teased this one heading into segment 2. Who's a guy that could be a surprise cut? Somebody that maybe we're talking about even competing for a starting job, that we think is a lock to make the 53. You look at, Eagles media platforms across the internet, and most, if not everybody, has him making the 53. Who could be that guy? Then suddenly is like, whoa, he was cut. Like, that's kind of crazy. For me, that's right guard Kenyan Green. And I think more people are starting to get on board with this. I think it's starting to gain momentum that Kenyan Green might not only is he not going to compete with Tyler Steen for the right guard job, but he might not even make this roster. I have not heard a peep about this guy since he was traded to Philadelphia in that C.J. Gardner-Johnson trade with the Houston Texans. He's currently injured, so he's not practicing. He's already behind the 8 ball in that way. His tape has been egregious in Houston over the last couple years. Like I said earlier, they drafted 3 offensive linemen. That hurts Kenyan Green even more than it does Tyler Steen. Like Miles Hinton, Cameron Williams, Drew Kendall, Holland Pierce. There's 4 young guys they brought in during the draft to compete with Kenyan Green. They have Matt Pryor, who's a proven veteran with starting experience, better starting experience than Green. He was drafted by the Eagles in 2018. They have Trevor Keegan heading into year 2, somebody that's cross-trained at both center and guard. Like, are we sure Kenyan Green's a lock to make this team? I'm still intrigued by him. Again, you're picked top 15 for a reason, even as bad as he's been in the NFL. And there's a lot of busts in the first round that go in the top 15, top 20 that just absolutely cannot play. And I completely understand that reality. But it's always intriguing when you have the best offensive line coach of all time in Jeff Stoutland that gets his hands on a player that clearly has a 15th overall skill set. And I don't want to give up just yet. Like, I am curious about what Kenyan Green could do this year, but I don't feel the Mekhi Becton vibes with Green like I did initially when they traded for him. I thought, and maybe it was just me trying to make myself feel better about the Gardner-Johnson trade, but I told myself, like, maybe Kenyan Green, like, hey, Jeff Stoutland's track record is pretty incredible with offensive linemen. But there are the Jamon Browns of the world and the Chance Warmacks that didn't make it, and maybe that is Kenyan Green. We'll see. I think he could make the roster. I think it's more likely than not that he makes the roster. Like, right now, what are the betting odds? Probably like, or what's the percentage chance? I'd say it's like over 50. He probably has I would say like a 53, 54% chance of making the roster. Maybe people would say it's higher, but I think he would be that surprise cut of somebody we thought would compete for a starting job with Tyler Steen, and then he ends up actually getting cut. To me, that's right guard Kenyan Green. I want to stick on the offensive line here before we take another break. And this superlative is, don't forget about them. Don't forget about Darien Canard and Trevor Keegan. Darien Canard and Trevor Keegan are 2 players on the offensive line that I think the Eagles like more than we're giving them credit for. And like I just said, they brought in 4 rookies to compete for jobs. They're training at both tackle and guard. I think they want a lot of these guys in-house long-term. But I could totally see the Eagles doing some phantom injury IR designation for Holland Pierce or Cameron Williams. Probably Cameron Williams more than anybody because of his draft reputation. Miles Hinton. Maybe they decide, hey, Darien Canard is a guy that we really like. That was one of our top tackle backups over the last couple years that can also play guard. Trevor Keegan, we're using at center and guard. He was a 5th-round pick just a year ago. Howie Roseman does not like to give up on his picks early. Those two, they might rather have active on the 53-man roster if those rookies aren't ready to go, and maybe they try to get one on the practice squad like a Holland Pierce or a Miles Hinton. Maybe they do that phantom injury thing. It feels like they do every single year. They did it last year with Anaya Smith. Maybe they do it this year with a day 3 rookie as well that they don't want to give up on. They say, oh, he's got a toe injury. And then Cameron Williams is out for the year, and Darien Canard or Trevor Keegan are on the 53. I'm telling myself not to forget about them too, but you guys as well, because I didn't have either one of them on my first 53-man roster projections before training camp. But now that I'm thinking about it more, I really do think it's underrated how much the Eagles like Canard as a potential replacement to Fred Johnson, who was their primary tackle backup last year. I think Canard likely makes this team, and people aren't really talking about him a whole lot. Like, he's working primarily as that second team, either it's left tackle or right tackle. He's like the top backup along with, Kendall Lamb as well. I think those are your top 2 tackle backups. And then Trevor Keegan, kind of getting lost in the shuffle right now because there's so much competition on the interior of the offensive line. Brett Toth is in there too. Competing with Kendall for that backup center spot. But Keegan's showing he could play some center. I think he had a good preseason last year. Don't forget about last year's 5th-round pick, Trevor Keegan out of the University of Michigan. All right, guys, we'll wrap up this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, what are the most important matchups that we have to watch in training camp when guys are going up mano a mano? We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions that we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, me and Locked On Eagles, we're playing on Yahoo Fantasy. I've been playing on Yahoo since 2009, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've been doing a league with my buddies since 2009. As I said, we're going to a live draft in just a couple weeks at a lake house, which is going to be so exciting. 2 keepers, 13 teams, a lot of players going in this draft. We need a website that is able to carry all those features, and that's Yahoo. In fact, to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is actually dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win, and it all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned to get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL, and let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. All right, thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. We are wrapping up this week of shows, a Friday edition you can find on YouTube, podcast platforms, on all audio feeds as well, Monday through Friday. Plus, we got 2 live shows for you on YouTube, noon Eastern time, Tuesdays and Thursdays, our squad show with myself, Mark Farzetta, Harry Mays, and Jason Martius, 3 Philadelphia sports radio legends, and myself. Not a bad lineup. So again, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Eagles wherever you're getting the show. Training camp, 1 week in the books, continuing some training camp superlatives, getting into positional battles, who's making the 53-man roster, surprise cuts, who's got the most to lose. Lots to talk about. Football season is back, and the Eagles actually are putting out surveys to their season ticket holders right now, trying to get a gauge for what people want to do with a potential new stadium or if they want to renovate the link. My vote would be to put a retractable roof on the link if possible. I think they're going to end up building a new stadium because Jeffrey Lurie wants a Super Bowl in Philadelphia one day, and I think they need an enclosed arena for that, or stadium, I should say. So interesting to see that as well. But a lot to talk about. I was thinking about this morning because for me, my favorite thing, going down to Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl and just kind of following along with training camp reports, I love hearing about one-on-ones, right? I love hearing about wide receivers against corners, offensive linemen against pass rushers. Like that's my favorite part of training camp and just football practice in general, right? And I started thinking, like, what are the most important positional battles? Like, not the ones that are the most entertaining, like, Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith versus Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson, right? Like, that's the obvious one. Stars against stars. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown versus Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. But which battles, especially in one-on-ones, but also 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s, team drills, one-on-ones as well, what are the most important battles? For me, I think the most important battle is Kelee Ringo against Devontae Smith. And it's not just Kelee Ringo against either or, A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. No, it's specifically Devontae. Even though, obviously, going up against A.J. Brown is going to help Kelee Ringo grow. A.J. Brown is the best one-on-one wide receiver in football, statistically. So, of course, it's going to help Ringo grow. And it sounds like him and Brown have been having some battles already this week at camp. For me, why it's more important for Ringo to do well against Devontae Smith is because Devontae's the kind of receiver that I'm nervous about when Ringo's on that kind of player. The twitchy, elite route runner that's really explosive right off the line of scrimmage. If Kelee Ringo is not jamming him at the line of scrimmage and press man coverage, sometimes I get nervous about what Ringo can do against those kind of players. Like when he's playing soft man and just mirroring a guy, when he's in zone coverage or off man, like reading their routes. That's when the mental part of the game, it has to be up a notch. Technique has to be up a notch when you're going up against Smitty. Because Devontae Smith, I think, is a top 5 route runner in the NFL. And A.J. Brown is a great route runner in his own right. But I think Ringo, who's a lengthier, bigger corner, I think the A.J. Browns of the world, I think he can handle that style of receiver better. Devontae Smith, like that's the kind of guy, if Kelee Ringo is really going to break out in year 3, if he's going to show us growth, that allows Fangio to fully trust him as a starter for all 17 games this year. I want to hear that maybe even Devontae catches the balls. Because, again, one-on-ones are set up for receivers to win. But I want to hear Kelee Ringo sticking with Devontae Smith the whole play. He was in his hip pocket. He mirrored the routes really well. His technique, his vision was sound. Like, that's what I want to hear. I think that might be, honestly, for the starting lineup, that might be the most important battle in all of training camp is Kelee Ringo against Devontae Smith. And another one, this time flipping it because it's more important for the offensive player, is Tyler Steen against Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and Moro Ujoma. I want to hear, again, Tyler Steen. I want to know, I'm going to feel confident that he can replace Mekhi Becton just fine and be a high-end starter at right guard. What better way to do that than going up against the best one-on-one pass-rushing defensive tackle in football in Jalen Carter? Or, because Tyler Steen's not Mekhi Becton size-wise, I'd love to hear that he can hold his own and anchor against a Jordan Davis, who, although he lost 26 pounds, is one of the best or biggest and hopefully best football players at his position in the world. He is a mammoth of a human being. Moro Ujoma was a top 15 pass rushing defensive tackle, according to Pro Football Focus last year. So that's 3 guys. And even Ty Robinson, a rookie that had 7 sacks last year, coming out of Nebraska is no joke. I want to hear Tyler Steen's having some good reps against those guys because defensive tackle is a really good position for the Eagles this year, even though it's young and there is no more Milton Williams or Fletcher Cox or Javon Hargrave. Like, it's a good group, and Tyler Steen is definitely going to be tested. And another one that's, I think, really important this time for a defensive player, going back to the secondary, Jalen Hurts against Drew Makuba. I want to see where these safeties are at because, excuse me, you guys know I was not a fan of getting rid of C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I really like the Drew Makuba pick in the second round in a vacuum. Jalen Hurts, though, I think this year has a much better command of the offense pre-snap. Year 2 of making checks at the line with Cam Jurgens. Jason Kelsey's not here anymore. It sounds like his vision and his ball placement has been unbelievable. The way he's looking off safeties, just knowing where the ball's going at all times. The accuracy, the timing, the rhythm has been pristine. Drew Makuba, I want to see how he's handling that. Like, can he bait Jalen Hurts into some things? Can he get some turnovers, some interceptions? How is he doing in potentially one-on-one coverage? Because I don't think Reed Blankenship or Sidney Brown are really strong coverage safeties. So for me, that's where Makuba comes in. I think he needs to kind of carry the load in that way. Let's see if he can take advantage of Jalen Hurts at all. And he's getting first-team reps at safety alongside Sidney Brown. So he's competing with Sid for that starting job next to Reed Blankenship. Hopefully we can hear Makuba. Let's hope he baited Hurts at least into a pick or 2. 5 interceptions last year out of Texas. Like, he is a ball hawk. It's part of why the Eagles drafted him. Gardner-Johnson had 6 interceptions last year. Like, there's a lot of picks walking out the door, and hopefully Makuba can replace that. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. We'll be back next week for 5 shows solo, 2 squad shows, 7 shows a week for you on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Until then, thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.